Welcome to On Spot. My name is Prince Adil Nchabeleng. Today we have on studio the President of Transform RSA, Crown Prince Adil Nchabeleng. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much.
We have a few questions we have lined up for you. The first question, the name Transform RSA. What inspired the naming of Transform RSA, and in the context of the development of South Africa, what are your views around transformation?
Yeah, I think let's start with the word Transform RSA. The name Transform RSA comes from Transform the Republic of South Africa. RSA stands for the Republic of South Africa, meaning that our aim and hopes and vision is to make sure that we bring about transformation. Transformation in the social, economic, political, and all other spheres of our society that requires transformation. Because coming back to where Africa finds itself in is, Africa is the least developed society in all societies of the world, from Asia to Europe to the Middle East. You look at the aspect of America in terms of North and South America, what you call South America, part of it, as well as the Upper America, which is the Canada side of it. Everyone around the world is developed except Africans. And for that reason, we wanted to push development, and that development can only happen through transformation. So you need transformation of society on the leading edge part of it to make sure that there is economic, social, civil, there is political, there is justice transformation, there is jurisprudence transformation, there is legislative transformation, and there's a variety of all forms of transformation that we need in our society. Transforming ourselves as human beings, becoming the leading figures of the world, becoming the examples of what being a human being should all be about. We are in the human race, and within humanity, there are different nationalities that have actually advanced themselves on an economic level, on a social level, on a political level, as well as on all other spheres, militarily and otherwise. And if you don't understand the transformation from that point of view, we will continuously be arguing over transformation as a relation to aspect of people accessing jobs or accessing tenders. We're not talking about tenders and jobs. We're talking about basics, about human life transformation, whereby you live a life that is decent, that is great, that is meaningful, that has a purpose. And with that life, you then create an environment by which you thrive, by making sure that all aspects of your life are covered with. In aspects of looking at the element of making sure that your spirituality is in its place. You can worship God in any manner and form you want. Your society is safe from you as an individual, from any spite or any malice from yourself as a person. The element of your contribution to humanity is raised of advancement.
Yes.
Economic transformation, purpose, contribution, scientific, economic, political, civil, all forms of contribution, being the best of the person. And on top of it, making sure that you live in an environment that defines who you are, an environment that is pleasant to live in, an environment that is accommodating of the changes and socioeconomic demands of your time. And you're not living in an oppressive regime that is anti-transformation, that oppresses the people and that ensures that the needs of the people are not served and are not served accordingly. So it is, in summary, really an element of one's self-transformation towards your society's transformation, towards your national level of transformation. And eventually, once you're a beacon of hope, you have done your levels of everything to do with self, social, and economic, and you include political, where you have responsible leaders of good character, of integrity, of courage, leaders who are honest and selfless, then you will experience a transformed society that is based on values of transformation, where we all live at the levels of equality, but enjoying different levels of our social and economic and political life interaction.
Can you just give us a few examples on how we can tackle each factor?
Okay, let's start at the most interesting part of transformation, economic transformation. Because with economic transformation, you sort out most of the other basic problems.
Yes.
People when they have resources, they have money, they have wealth, they have a lifestyle, they have security of living. They can then deal with all the other issues of their lives, which is, for instance, how they live their life in what community are they going to live, in what suburb, in what environment, if it's a city, in what block of the city they want to be living in, if it is a farm, in what level of a farm life that they want to enjoy and everything. If it is in a village, in what level of a village you want to be living in. The concept of transformation from an African perspective was when we had our own village lifestyle, village towns at the time. Those villages were villages that were designed around one, there was a pride, there was the cultural element, there was a spiritual element, there was the element of the wealth of the village, there was the element of the agriculture that provided the food of the people, there was the element of the military around that village and the security support. There was an element that spoke to how we would interact with other community villages that are in the neighborhood or are actually distant. How we would do marriages, cultural programs, and everything. So this is how a human life is all about. The same has to translate to how we're living today. We have lost our roots to our African customs, values, as well as heritage. But we can transplant it into the new modernity and society that we're living in, whereby our cultural revolution, where we bring our culture into the heart of our lifestyles, into the heart, whether it is in the city, whether it is to do in a peri-urban dwelling, whether it is to do with the suburb. We bring that culture to enhance the lifestyle that we live. Yes. Rather than this system whereby you are a cultureless, heritageless, and really no identityless individual, whereby you are actually just a consumer living on a day-to-day basis without any identity of who you are as a person. So transformation must be about bringing back the values that are most important to how we define the value of our lives. Partying today is a cultural element. People show you lifestyle parties, how they are enjoying a day-to-day lifestyle on a party level. But, partying in them just having fun, not doing anything that is constructive beyond the element of consumerism. But our lifestyle was very rich. When we had parties, when we had imbizos, when we had umtlanganos, when we were doing our lekotlas, when we were doing our ritual weddings in terms of mekiti and all of those things, it had a meaning. And that meaning was how we defined ourselves. People will be dressed and clothed in a particular manner. There will be a group of people who would live and make sure that they have compositions, poetry, music, dance, cooking, element of social display of what we are as a people. And it was enriched. That's the kind of transformation that they enjoyed at their times. Their houses were all standard. They had roundabouts that were bigger in terms of the size of what individual wanted to live in. And they were all hygienic. They were all kept within clean environments. They were all given to individuals that needed shelter and home. The same should be in the modern system that we're in, where we're talking modern transformation, where we're saying our lives should be better than the current misery we come out of, which is apartheid, subjugation, segregation, oppression, colonialization, as well as this global hegemony of the global markets and system that is just breathing down on us, that is oppressing us in terms of just coming into our country to extract minerals and leave us as consumers of their after product from taking on our minerals. So we want real transformation that is going to give us value, that's going to give us our pride, restore our dignity, and give us our essence of being humans that are worth counting and are worth identifying as people on this earth.
You mentioned the aspect about consumerism, that we are just consuming, that's our lifestyle. How do we move away as a nation, and how can a normal individual move away from that type of lifestyle?
Look, normally consumerism is not wrong if it is done to have items and goods and services that you need for your daily subsistence and living. Beyond that is actually excess. We are overindulging, we are overspending, we are wasting money on things that we don't need. So consumerism should be a way of us creating economies, creating community-based factories, creating community-based manufacturing, making sure that we have businesses that provides us the needs of our day-to-day basis. Such as where, for instance, in a community whereby you have, for instance, take Soweto, Alexander, all right, or Deep Slot, or you can take any other, Mamelodi. They have a huge community.
millions of people in one community, all completely concentrated together. Mamelodi, I think, is over 2 million plus people, for instance, if I'm to make an assumption. In there, you have the extreme level of consumerism whereby people buy everything. But when you look at around this community of Mamelodi, there is no supporting industries for any of that consumption. There is no direct ownership of any of that consumerism that links to paying back and giving back to the community, whereby the things that are consumed by the community are somehow brought back in terms of support for community development, community transformation, community element of projects for economic transformation, social and civil, whereby there will be schools, there will be community proper roads maintenance, there will be housing for people, there will be an element of providing for graduates, giving them bursaries and everything. There will be tutorship for kids who are going through their elementary education that are tutored by NGOs, as well as foundations, as well as community-based structures that is supported directly by industry. Our people are all consumers. Alexander, Soweto, Township, Guguletu, you go to, Umlazi. Everywhere we find black people in the majority. They are all isolated in a community, and they all have to move between their community, commute to a district town or district center, which is a town that supports their interests and needs. And the owners of those companies, Pick and Pay, ShopRite, Macro, Game, all of them, are not even situated in any of those communities, don't even know the day-to-day issues. Whereas if you go to certain communities, for instance, go to Stellenbosch, they have their own micro industries. Their winery industry, their cheese industry, their support services, their financials, their banks are all there because most of the banking or industry owners are all based in there. So the community issues that are faced by the community are actually directly cared for by the people who are running the capital. We want to change that scenario and create a scenario model whereby our people run their own entities in their communities, supporting the people, improving the lives of the people, ensuring that we live in a diverse, social, economically, wealth creation society, whereby individuals are no longer dependent on entity organizations for their living and subsistence. And their lives are empowered by the community businesses and opportunity that they provide in the community.
Can you just give us examples on how our communities themselves can transform themselves and participate economically and gainfully?
Look, this is not rocket science. Banks depend on the people that deposit monies into their banking accounts, all right? The same system should be actually brought down. Our legislation allows for mutual banks to be created, for community banking to be created, for NGOs to have their own clubs, like for instance, club banking. But at the same time, they penalize those that have aspirations to create such entities on the basis that the minute you start coming up together, for instance, in Mamelodi, there's many burial societies. Why are those burial societies not converted into miniature burial society banks, where they contribute the same 100 Rand? It gives them the equivalent of money that is saved by a collective of people. And when they need to acquire that money, access that money, they are given an opportunity by which the bank, which is the Reserve Bank of South Africa, says, we give you a license. If you've got 100,000, we give you security against the 100,000, which means we will give you an ability to use that 100,000 in order to can borrow out that money to R1 million with the security of 100,000 in security. That's how banks operate.
Does that exist right now?
It doesn't exist because they don't want black people to access that. It exists for big banks. Big bank says to you, come and deposit money into our account and we will give you credit or loans whenever you require it. Where is that credit or loan coming in from? That money comes from your deposit, by the way. You give them R1. They promise you that we can loan you against that R1, we can loan you 10 rands. Where is that 10 rand coming in from? Because the banks create the money in the process on the basis that you have a security against it. And they know that that loan is securitized, which means it has its own protection. If you default against the payment, they can go and take an asset that you have already purchased on the basis of that loan. So that is how clever the system works. But our people have never come together to that level of unity, whereby the experts, the professionals, the academics, the people that are in our society can humble themselves and stop depending on big banks, big institutions, and come back to communities and saying, guys, let's start our own thing. Building societies. There used to be hundreds of building societies in South Africa. By the time we came to 1994, there were already, by 1990, there were over 100 banks in South Africa. Before they shrunk to 5 top banks in South Africa, there were over 100 banks. Building society, mutual banks, there were investment clubs, there were societies that were created at the time. There were housing projects which were under banking. They had a license to develop houses, use those houses as security against the payment of those houses in the bank and deposit of salaries of people's salaries into that bank. And that's how they created the money monopoly game of money creation as well as the banking system supporting them. The same system exists for every one of us. But go to the Reserve Bank, go to the Prudential Authority and make an application as a community to be granted that level of license. They will give you incredible pain for you to access that license, and they'll make sure eventually you fail so that you give up, so that the interests of the shareholders of the bank, which is the major monopolies, can be preserved and kept at its all-time existing power. And that is where we are actually done wrong. That is why there is no transformation in South Africa at the banking and financial sector level. Because we as Black people, whenever we want to do something of our own, other people come and look at it and say, no, legislation prohibits you from doing it. Whereas legislation is supposed to be created to empower us.
Seeing that we are in the new South Africa and the legislation is supposed to have changed and we are supposed to have now new rules and regulations that are benefiting the majority, what is it that is stopping the legislation from changing to benefit the majority, and what should be done about it if it's not changing?
Okay. The first point to consider is who makes legislation. South Africans, ordinary masses, don't make any legislation. Big companies employ other companies, lobby and advocacy groups, such as you would see in the level of, for instance, AfriForum, you would see them in the Solidarity, the Freedom, whatever, you would see them in all of those other entities that are actually fighting government in terms of changing of certain laws and creation of other different laws. In the South African context, the only nationality in the South African overall rainbow nation is the white minority still enjoy the platform whereby they can make laws and create new laws as and when they will. Why? Because the environment of our legislation and legislature is based on money and access to money and power. Our people at society level, at community level, don't have any access to that power. They don't have the money. They are not organized enough to can start saving their pennies, a little money that they have, in order to create the laws that they need that will protect their interests. Only big companies are doing that. If they want a legislation, for instance, in financial sector, they go and hire a company, legal companies, advocacy and lobby NGOs, as well as Freedom Under Law, current NGOs that are running, as well as Helen Suzman foundations and all of them. And they use those foundations like your OUTA. You know, OUTA was created by the transport companies, which is AVs and all of them. They funded people to go and start this organization that started the advocacy against the e-toll, which means they created a new legislation environment where they opposed and they did away with the e-toll through the OUTA, for instance, organization. So big companies have access to legislation making. Ordinary community people don't have that privilege because they are not organized enough. The legislature,
or they're not exposed. I'm hearing this for the first time.
No, they're exposed. It's because the law, the responsibility, for instance, of a member of parliament who has a constituency, his responsibility is to go back to his constituency and go into the constituency and say in his constituency and say, people, what are the needs of our community and our constituency in a society? What can I take from you and go and use to table to parliament and let parliament debate these issues so that we can come up with a set of bills and laws that protect your interests. But our legislatures don't do that. Members of parliament are just members of parliament from a party point of view. They get deployed to party offices, they discuss party politics, they discuss party quarrels and factional issues, and they don't look at the interests of the people. They don't create laws. Very few political parties understand legislature, their role in parliament and how to use parliament to create or revoke laws that are against the majority of the people. They are not saving the masses. Instead, they are saving big businesses, they are saving big interests in terms of big corporations. And again, multinationals that comes into South Africa and saying, we want to have an exception. We want to be treated as an exception when we come into the country. We bring our investment, which is usually not investment because they're going to use your local banks to raise some of the money that they require. They say we bring investment, but all that they're bringing is their sovereignty, character, and power into the country, using the balance sheet that they have in other countries, which they don't even bring in seed in South Africa. They still take profits outside of South Africa. So if you don't understand that machinery, you will be confused. You will go around like politicians who come complaining to communities about how government is not listening to them, whereas they are in power and they are sitting in legislature, they are sitting in parliament, whereby they are supposed to be creating laws, debating laws, doing away with old laws that keeps us in bondage, that keeps us in oppression, that keeps us in slavery. There are thousands of laws that are anti us as a people. Laws that we inherited from the old apartheid government. Which political party has ever done away with some of those laws? They are even using them today to penalize us in all sorts of manner. When we say we don't want something like that, they will go and find, a means by which they can even go against a mass protest using an old apartheid law in order to penalize the people, which means they have not changed anything. They have not transformed the system. They have not transformed society. They are actually becoming an oppressive regime, using the laws that were created against us previously, now to be used against us in our so-called democratic state and society.
This sounds to me like our issues are actually on the foundational level. I hope everyone at home is listening, and we should be finding ways of contributing towards these legislations, and then we should be actually finding the people we put in power in our local levels. We should be asking them to contribute and actually make
significant input.
Exactly.
Very important.
So now we spoke briefly about legislation and also how it affects the economy and everything else. So at this point where we are, what is it that we could change that can assist in people moving forward, generally, anything?
I think you need to create a system in South Africa that encourages creation of wealth. And wealth is not created as in this big vision of being a multi-billionaire or multi-millionaire. No. Wealth in a sense that you live a life and you've got an income that is able to take care of your needs in your life. So the majority of our people, 80% of South Africans are living below the poverty line. Only 20% are living in that category of affluent, well-off, and highly successful individuals. The 1% of the 20% enjoys the entire wealth in South Africa. 80% of the balance are living in abject poverty, in townships, in squalor communities, in rural villages. They are living on, this human settlement, shanty towns and squalors scenario. And they don't have access to any of these things because they don't have jobs. Government has even done worse. It gives them a grant. That grant has encouraged people from never moving away out of that community, because if they move and start developing their lives, they lose the grant. So you're not even incentivized to do anything better with your life, because the minute you improve your life, the grant automatically falls away.
So how do we create this wealth?
Look, wealth creation is through income. You need industry. You need government to create all support mechanisms for industry to exist. And on top of it, there must be exchange with government in terms of government making sure it protects industries in South Africa. Today, you cannot even create any industry in South Africa because you have an influx of products coming from all sorts of countries that actually floods our ports. And our ports are unable to stop that influx because there are no laws that are created by members of parliament, that are created and implemented by the executive, which is the president and the cabinet, in order to protect our industries. Talk about textile industries. No creation of textile industry will exist. Even if you create it today, you incentivize it, it will never survive because the laws are saying that you can import as much as you want of any textile you want at the cheapest price possible. Not looking at the socio-economic impact that it has on the local textile industry if you bring in cheap imports against textiles that are produced in South Africa that are supposed to be subsidized by government in order for the sector and industry to continue.
What are unions saying about this? Because this affects their workers directly.
Unions are useless in the majority. We just launched our own, public sector union of South Africa, commercial union of South Africa, because we felt tired of what unions represent in the majority. Most of these unions are actually no longer workers' representatives. They are actually unions using the workers' platform, protecting business, big business, which means the employer. Exactly. They're always siding on the side of the employer, which means the union leaders have sold their souls and have given up the fight for the workers' needs against the benefits that they're getting.
So now it's an employers' union, it's no longer the employees' union.
It's an employers' union. The employers, the bosses, the corporate capital barons, the owners of capital in South Africa are actually controlling unions. That's why you would have COSATU, you would have FEDUSA, you would have SAFTU, you would have SATAU. All of these unions always having bosses of the unions, which is the union leaders, ending up in big companies, ending up on company boards, ending up with major cushion jobs, not community-based structures, not community-based NGOs that continues to fight for the rights of the interests of workers, not unions that continue to build wealth. There was a perfect example, by the way, in Spain, a couple of years ago, 10 years or so, before the COVID situation happened and before Spain's economy was actually completely collapsed with the coming of the euro. They had a union activism whereby 40% of Spain's economy was owned by union houses, was owned by workers. Houses, banks, building societies, construction, manufacturing, entities that created value in the society. They own textile, they own motor industry, they owned all sorts of industry. And that research was provided. I even gave most of that information to some of the local union bosses in South Africa, from COSATU to SAFTU to they had all of this information. But most of them were not interested in implementing any of that. So you can use the model. The models are there. That is why we're saying socialism is the gateway for us in our lifetime. If we don't talk about socialism, we are not going to end the scourge of poverty amongst our people. So we have to bring in certain values that says that there must be a shared economy. There must be an economy whereby people can live amongst themselves and share the value of that which is created economically. Right now, we are on the periphery, if not on the outside border of that sharing society. There is no caring. So, to advance the idea further, you have to make sure that you craft and you develop leaders. That is why for us transformation is important. We're not looking at the masses in terms of the leaders at the mass level where everybody is leading. We're leading at key individuals that can start taking upon themselves to say, I want to be a transformation champion. I want to be a transformation ambassador. I want to be a transformation activist. I want to be a transformation unionist. I want to be a transformation guardian. I want to be a transformation leader. I want to be a transformation everything. Businessman whose focus is you're going in there, you're going to create certain conditions that abides by the constitution of transformation to say, this is what we define as a transformed society where we want to be. Transform RSA, we're not interested in having thousands and thousands of people all just chanting, going for masses, doing rallies, doing marches. At the end of the day, it ends there. We're interested in attracting the best quality of our people who wants to see real change, a real impactful transformation happening. One starting with themselves. The requirement and condition is you cannot be a member, you cannot be an activist in Transform RSA unless we can see the change with you. Your life must change immediately. The minute you come in and you understand the constitution, you understand the preambles, you understand the vision, you now take on the role. You attack a sector, you come in, we give you set of support rules to say, go and do this in this sector. Go and participate in this particular industry. Go and be part of an agent who will be forming structures that are going to bring about transformation in this particular environment. It started over 500 years ago. We still have the remnants of the colonial system, 350 after the arrival of Jan van Riebeeck, which was not the first time when they were attempting colonialization. It started off in the 1400s in Africa when they started coming into Africa and ensuring that our empires, our systems of society were dismantled and destroyed. And they worked it over a period of time to make sure that they erased everything that gave us an identity, culture, heritage, aspect of spirituality, aspect of pride, our wealth, our aspect of work and how we created value and everything. And they erased it and stole most of it. And after stealing it, they codified it and they changed its nature and character. And they brought it back. And everybody says, oh, it's Western systems, how amazing and incredible. We had towns and roads and we had societies and systems. We had agricultural systems that were the best of the time. Why are we not talking about that? How we used to run civilized societies where you would have healthcare, you had doctors, you had midwives, you had people running sectors in terms of manufacturing, you had traders. Remember the east coast of Africa, the west coast of Africa, were trading ports, were trading coast. When they talk about the Dutch East Indian Company, which brought in Jan van Riebeeck, they're talking about the east of Africa, including India and Asia, when they combined it. When they talk about all of the produce, they'll tell you how the east coast of Africa and the west coast of Africa was so highly advanced and developed, where they had cities with double-story, triple-story, multiple-story houses, systems, water flowing, there was sewage, there was towns. We even had in Africa towns where you would had lit streets, by the way, where there was lighting on streets. But they don't talk about it today because over a couple of hundred years, they erased all that history, took away all the heritages and our empires, which gave us nationhood at the time, and they brought in the borders and created that whole aspect of fragmenting ourselves and made sure that we never have a courage to go back to our roots. So Transform RSA says, let's go back to the roots, find out what we lost, and based on that, start rebuilding it and transform our societies. And based on that, we transform ourselves as Africa. We go beyond the borders of Africa and we go into African regions and we launch transformation programs where we have Transform Angola, Transform Nigeria, where you have Transform Kenya, you have Transform Tanzania, you have Transform Zimbabwe, Transform. That is what we are aiming for, not this minute program whereby we are running around in South Africa trying to fight against a few odd 400 members of parliament who are mostly don't even have a clue what they're supposed to be doing. And what they're supposed to be doing is to empower the people through their legislation process. So Transform RSA is a real active live project and it will go beyond our lifetime. We are just servants. We were given this vision through our ancestors who said to us, this is the path that you must follow. This is the element of life that you must pursue, because we have ancestral lineage that we can recall of leaders and kings in Africa. And that ancestral lineage still lives in our blood till today. And God gave us that courage and the inspiration to say, revive the cultural ways of your people and make sure you modernize it in a way that it works in synchronicity to the time that you're in. So that's what we want to do. Live a good life, be a great leader, but at the same time understand that your mandate is to serve the needs of those that are less fortunate. And that's what we've been doing. We have made lots of enemies. We will make lots of friends. We don't care who becomes our enemy. As long as they understand that we have a core vision and mission and an aspect of a principle to maintain and values to achieve. Again, it's very important that we must understand why do we have a state? Why do we go through elections? Why do we elect a president, a ruling party that gives us the leadership of a president? And after that, why do we have members of parliament that actually creates the various committees, portfolios, which is now ending up in departments, and what those departments are supposed to be doing? The role of the president is to lead the various cabinet members, which are the ministers, in executing their role. And his role, it defines it clearly in the Constitution, that his role is to ensure that there is an optimum functioning of the state. Optimum function of the state meaning that he has to oversee the various departments in terms of the leaders in those departments, not interfering in the departments, the leaders of those departments to execute their mandate role towards the people, to ensure that there is delivery of water in the water and sanitation. There is an aspect of creating a sustainable environment as well as a thriving environment of business. And in our case, the only time we can say South Africa is transforming is when we see radical change. Radical economic transformation is a critical important of that change. If we don't define it from that point of view, we're not going to see black people's lives being transformed or changed or moved into a higher gear of living a great life rather than this mediocre life that we're living, where 80% of our people are stuck in poverty, unemployment, and in an massive level of inequality. A life of a black child, 10 years old, compared with the life of a white child, 10 years old, are completely stark different from each other, in a sense that the lifestyle that is enjoyed and the access to products, services, goods, as well as a community that is actually empowering that white child is completely different from that of a black child, because the circumstances of poverty, the struggling, the environment which are untransformative, in the sense that our children don't have access to the best of anything in their society. There is no developmental society in the way they are sitting. There are no sports facilities. There are no educational facilities. There are no tutoring facilities. There are no proper schools. There are no proper roads. There are no proper houses. They are stuck in poverty in shanty squalor towns. Same child, 10 years white, same child, 10 years black. If the president can start using that scenario to say, my role as a leader of the society is to make sure that that 10-year child who's black lives the equivalent life of a 10-year child who is white. They can enjoy the same services. They can enjoy the same community support mechanisms and structures. They can have a thriving community where they live in. There must be proper infrastructure for roads. There must be proper houses. And ensure that we integrate their lives and we interweave them into one society. Our suburbs are not just white in terms of suburban outlook and success. They are black, white, multicultural suburbs. They are South African identifying. When services are brought to our people, we don't throw them far-flung into the outback of our societies, in bushes, in shanty squalor communities, in townships where we don't want to see them. We only visit them for imbizos, and we visit them for ichisanyama at the corner, and the motorcade runs off as fast as possible outside the community. They go and stay elsewhere. We want to have the same lifestyle of that 10-year-old in the white suburbs, who's a white child, being enjoyed by a 10-year-old South African black child. And it's the role of the president to ensure that that is possible, by making sure that all the levers of the state, the various departments, work in tandem to create the scenario model of that white child and a black child living a lifestyle of equality, where there is no more inequality. A child in South Africa now being seen as a child who must access socio-economic opportunities, education, skills, element of being given the opportunity to have parents that have an income that can support the lifestyle needs of that 10-year-old who is growing up. The president's role is that. Not to have meetings all over the show.
So if the president is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, what can we as South Africans do to change the president even? Instead of waiting for elections and party decisions, because it takes too long.
In our case, we are stuck with the constitution. Any change that we have to make is a change that must be constitutional. If we want to see our president perform his tasks, if we want to see our cabinet ministers do their job, the only way we can go through it is through the vote and through the constitutional process. Anything outside that is regarded as criminal, is regarded as unconstitutional and unlawful, which means,
but it's not working.
If you were to overthrow a president in South Africa, you can only do it through constitutional means. You vote them out, or you push for a constitutional reform that says there must be included in the constitution the ability by the people to recall a president. Right now, it cannot happen except through the party, and that is why party structures only exist to protect one another. They don't exist in order to protect the interests of the masses. They are not even held responsible by the masses. The only time our political parties feel the pinch in South Africa is when they are recalled in their positions and when they don't qualify for certain amount of votes when they go for ballots. That's the only time. So 5 years is a waiting period. You elect the wrong president, you elect the wrong cabinet, you put in wrong members of parliament into parliament, you will have to suffer for the next 5 years until they've done their job. Unless there is internal squabbles where they fight each other to a point where they collapse and the system is completely dissolves on its own. So it's very important when we go towards building political parties, civil society movements, participating in our society of building the kind of caliber leaders that we need, that we must understand that we must elect people who understand their job. Yes. Not opportunists that we have right now, who are just there for the lifestyle, the glim and glass, the show off, the loud talking with nothing to show for it. We must elect people who are very passionate in serving our people, not passionate in saving themselves, pretending to be doing it for the people. So the model of leadership has to change. It hasn't changed. We have a president right now who has the most obscene amount of wealth. According to records, nobody can even account as to how that wealth was accumulated. Most of it, we cannot even question it because it's based on the benefits that were accrued to him through white monopoly capital. He was always the chairman of this company, chairman of that company, involved in a variety of activities. We've had of late when the Marikana scenario happened, he was called in to go and intervene on behalf of bosses of mining companies to go and stop the strike, and he had to use his power as a political leader in order to quench and quell the current uprising that was happening in Marikana when the workers were demanding a simple 12,500 living condition income, basic income which is not even sufficient. Yet our society says a basic income in South Africa must be 3,500. How are you going to live? Which white person can live on 3,500 in South Africa? Which president in South Africa can survive on 3,500 with 5 children, with a house, with cars, with all of those things? So we have completely missed the mark. The role of a president is to create a thriving economy, a thriving society, a thriving nation, building pride in his people, restoring the heritage values, bringing tribal and cultural heritage values, wealth, the cultural heritage that we had in terms of our element of our culture in the way it was lived during time immemorial. You have now, for instance, you go to UK, they have their tribal culture. They have the English, the Brits, the Scots, and all of them. They are still preserving their tribal culture. You go to their parliament, they're dressed in the way they want. They live in the manners that they want. They enjoy the lifestyle that they actually subscribe to. They will still be wearing suits, but you'll still find a guilt in it. You'll still find an element that displays that this is where they came from, and this is how they define themselves. They still even have a culture whereby the cars that they've used over all those years are still preserved in their most pristine state and are used in terms of when they are doing their cultural activities, religious activities, heritage activities, national activities. The Prime Minister follows the rules of heritage and culture and preserves society. The leader in terms of the Queen follows the heritage systems of their country. Why are we not having that in South Africa? Go to the Chinese. The Chinese won their freedom over what they call the Cultural Revolution. They said we're going to revolt, but we're not just going to do an economic revolution, but we want a cultural revolution, which brings our culture at the center of everything that we're doing, and from there on we build on it. They became the most modernized, the most civilized, the most advanced on anything you can imagine. They build everything that the world demands and requires. They have the most highly skilled of anything. Doctors, scientists, graduates, artisans, engineers, you name it, you find them. Educators, technology, they are highly advanced. Income is distributed in China. Everybody has an income, and everybody enjoys the best of income of their society. Why can we not do it in South Africa? We have selfish leaders who don't care about the welfare of the people. We would rather drive in a 20 motorcade delegation, one man being driven in a 20 motorcade that closes off the road and pushes out everybody else and speeds off to where we don't know. And they are forever late, by the way. You can't explain why. They are always rushing and going to one place to another. But that motorcade sits there waiting for a single individual, running over. The cars don't stop, by the way. They are kept on idling, waiting for any emergency that may occur, so that they can whisk out the head of state and move them out completely. Are we in that scenario where we have achieved so much that there is such a big threat to the head of our state in South Africa? No.
Not.
Most people don't even care. Because all that they want to do is to pass through their days and make sure that the basics are survived. So the role of our president is quite critical. If we don't work on understanding and defining a caliber of a president, what the president must do, how he must achieve our ambitions, aspirations, and objectives, we will forever be bringing in people who will just be there for their self-interest. We have a situation in South Africa today. That situation says that the most thriving economy is based on coal in South Africa. We mine coal, we transform coal in terms of fuels, we make fuels out of it, we create crude out of it, which is oil, we create petroleum, we create plastic, we create steel out of it, we create industries out of coal. We go out, our president goes out a couple of months ago, goes to one of the international conventions in the world, and goes and signs off. He says South Africa will stop using coal and will stop anything that is coal industrialization based. And as a result, gets back an income of 130 billion, which was pledged in one of those conferences, to say with that amount of money, $8.3 billion, which was pledged to say we will help you transition beyond coal and we will help you now go into the other modern industries. We're not even yet at the very, basic level. We're not even yet at the level where we have made sure that this coal is used for everything that we don't even need it anymore. And we're doing away with it. And the job of our president is to reverse that. He's supposed to make sure that we're the leading country economically, militarily. We're the leading country in terms of energy, security, technology. All of these things. And they're not doing it. We're the leading country in manufacturing. Today, anything that has to do with manufacturing is we bring boxes from the port, we put them into these warehouses that are run by Take-A-Lot, and then an Amazon, because we're now becoming an Amazon society, where everything else comes in box and packages and it's shipped into the houses. And that's the economy that they're talking about, the financialization of our society and economy. So it's these things that we find that we have a problem today with our leaders in society, starting from the head of our state, the president himself has not done anything to change the socio-economic setup, the socio-economic print of South Africa as an economy itself. Instead, black people are more poor.
We've come to the end of our discussion. Thank you very much,
Prince Adil
Nchabeleng, the President of Transform RSA. Thank you.
Thank you so much.